I've been married to her for 8 years. Together for 11.
We weren't a fairy tale couple, but we were solid, or at least I thought we were.
Same routines, same jokes, same lazy Sunday mornings. That was the comfort.
The problem is, comfort can rot quietly.
The first cracks didn't come as explosions. They came as irritations.
She started snapping at me over nothing: how I loaded the dishwasher, how I breathed too loudly at night, how I asked normal questions like how her day was. Everything I did suddenly annoyed her.
She rolled her eyes a lot. Smirked when I talked.
Corrected me in front of friends like I was a child.
Then the phone thing started. Screen always face down. Password changed for work security.
She'd step into another room to text, come back smiling, then go cold the second she saw me looking.
I told myself I was being paranoid. Married people don't cheat out of nowhere, right? But intimacy faded fast. Not just sex, everything. No random hugs. No leaning into me on the couch.
She felt physically present but emotionally checked out, like she was already living another life and I was just background noise. I remember one night, very clearly, when she came home late and smelled different.
Not perfume, intentional.
She kissed my cheek like it was a chore and immediately went to shower. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the sink, feeling this tight knot form in my chest.
That was the moment something shifted. I didn't have proof. I didn't even have a clear accusation.
Just a quiet, growing certainty that I was being slowly pushed out of my own marriage, and I had no idea why yet.
After that night, I started noticing patterns I hadn't wanted to see before.
Her schedule stopped making sense.
Late meetings on days she used to come home early. Weekend errands that took hours.
Phone calls she'd take outside, even when it was cold, pacing like she was nervous someone might overhear.
I tried to talk to her. Casually at first. You've been busy lately. Everything okay? She laughed it off, sharp and dismissive. Said I was being needy.
Said work was stressful and I should be more supportive instead of interrogating her. The way she said it made me feel small, like I was already in the wrong for even asking.
But the math didn't add up.
Her paycheck didn't change, yet she had new clothes, nicer underwear, lingerie I'd never seen before and never saw on me.
When I asked about it, she rolled her eyes and said, "Do I need permission to buy things now?" Somehow I ended up apologizing. The lying wasn't even subtle.
She'd tell me she was with one friend, then later mention a detail that clearly came from someone else. When I pointed out the inconsistency, she snapped that I was twisting things and that my memory sucked.
Gaslighting, I'd later realize. At the time, it just made me doubt my own sanity.
One evening, her phone buzzed while she was in the shower.
I didn't touch it. I swear I didn't.
But the name flashed on the lock screen, just a first name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji.
My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down.
When she came out, wrapped in a towel, I asked who it was.
She didn't even hesitate. Said it was a coworker's nickname. Laughed.
Told me I was reading way too much into nothing. Then she got dressed and went to bed without another word. I lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling, realizing I was no longer just suspicious. I was being lied to, deliberately, and she was getting bolder about it.
Whatever was happening wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was active.
And it was happening right in front of me. A week later, everything accelerated. No slow burn, no careful unraveling, just a sudden crack that let the truth leak out. She left her laptop open on the kitchen table while she ran to the store. That alone was unusual.
Normally it was locked down like a vault.
I told myself not to look. I stood there arguing with myself like an idiot, heart pounding, until a message notification popped up in the corner of the screen.
I didn't even have to touch anything. Last night was insane. Can't stop thinking about you. My hands went numb.
I sat down slowly, like my legs had forgotten how to work.
I clicked. I shouldn't have, but I did. There it was. Weeks of messages. Flirting that turned explicit fast. Inside jokes I didn't understand. Complaints about me, how I was boring, predictable, always home. She told him I was more like a roommate. She told him she felt alive with him. She told him she was planning things. What wrecked me wasn't just the sex talk. It was how casually she rewrote our life together, like I was an inconvenience she tolerated until something better came along. 11 years reduced to jokes and eye-roll emojis. I heard the door open and panic slammed into me. I didn't have time to process, to plan, to calm down. She walked in smiling, arms full of groceries, and stopped dead when she saw my face. I asked her one question. Just one. I said his name. For a split second, barely a second, she froze. The mask slipped. Then it snapped back into place. She scoffed, dropped the bags on the counter, and said, "You went through my stuff? Are you serious right now?" That was it. No denial. No explanation. Just offense. Like I was the criminal. In that moment, I knew two things for sure: she was cheating, and she had no intention of owning it without a fight. I told her to stop deflecting and explain. My voice was shaking, but I didn't raise it. She did. She said I was invading her privacy. Said it was emotional cheating at most and only because I'd been distant, which was wild, considering she was the one treating me like furniture. Then she flat out claimed the messages were exaggerated, just flirting, like that somehow made it better. When I pointed at the screen and read her own words back to her, she changed tactics. Suddenly she was crying. Big, dramatic sobs. Said she felt trapped in the marriage. Said I never really listened. Said she didn't think I'd react like this. Then, without missing a beat, she wiped her eyes and got mean. She accused me of spying on her for weeks. Asked if I'd been following her. Said my insecurity was a huge turn-off. It was dizzying, every sentence contradicted the last, but she delivered them all with absolute confidence. I asked if she'd slept with him. She paused. Looked away. Said, "Why does that even matter?" That pause told me everything. I said his name again and asked how long it had been going on. She said a few weeks. Later it became a few months. Later she said she didn't know exactly. The timeline kept changing depending on what sounded least damaging in the moment. At one point she actually laughed and said, "You're acting like I murdered someone. Like betraying your spouse was some minor faux pas." I felt like I was standing in the middle of a hurricane made entirely of lies, watching the person I trusted most twist reality to protect herself. There was no remorse. Just self-preservation. And the scariest part? She was good at it. If I hadn't seen the messages with my own eyes, I might have believed her. Once the denial cracked, everything came out at once, fast, messy, and brutal. Her phone started buzzing non-stop. She didn't bother hiding it anymore. I watched messages stack up while we were mid-argument. When I asked her to tell him it was over, she said she needed time to think. Time. Like I was asking for a favor, not basic respect. Then she admitted they'd slept together. Not once. Not a mistake. Multiple times. Hotels. His apartment. Even once in his car during her late meeting. Each detail felt like a punch I couldn't brace for. My chest burned. My ears rang. I had to sit down because my legs gave out. She said it didn't mean anything. Then said it meant everything. Said he understood her in ways I never did. Said she never planned to leave me, she just wanted happiness. Somehow, in her version of events, she was the victim of her own desires. I asked if she used protection. She rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. That nearly broke me more than the cheating itself. While I was trying to process the fact that my entire marriage was imploding in real time, she started listing my flaws. Like this was a performance review. Too safe. Too predictable. Not ambitious enough.
I realized she'd been building a case against me in her head for months, rehearsing it, waiting for the moment she could unload it all.
I didn't recognize her anymore.
The woman standing in front of me wasn't my wife, it was someone cold, defensive, and strangely relieved to finally stop pretending.
That night, I slept on the couch.
Not because she asked, but because I couldn't stand to be in the same bed with her.
I stared at the ceiling until morning, feeling grief crash over me in waves, realizing this wasn't just betrayal. Morning didn't bring clarity. It brought nausea. She acted weirdly normal. Made coffee. Scrolled her phone.
Asked if I wanted toast like we were discussing weekend plans instead of the wreckage of our marriage. When I asked how she could be so calm, she shrugged and said she'd already cried about it months ago.
That sentence stuck in my head. She'd processed this. Grieved it.
Made peace with it before I even knew there was a problem. I was just now entering a disaster she'd already mapped out. Then the sudden events kept coming. Her sister called, furious, asking what I'd done to upset her. Apparently my wife had called her in tears, leaving out the affair and framing me as controlling and paranoid.
Damage control in real time. An hour later, her phone rang again.
This time she didn't leave the room. She answered, whispered, laughed.
When I asked who it was, she said, "Does it matter?"
That casual cruelty hurt more than yelling would've. I felt like I was losing control of the narrative of my own life.
I started questioning myself, had I missed signs? Could I have prevented this?
Then the anger surged back, hot and sharp, reminding me that nothing I did justified deception on this scale.
By noon, she told me she needed space to think clearly. Translation: she needed time to talk to him without me around.
She packed a bag like this was a spontaneous trip, not an emotional evacuation, and said she might stay with a friend. Before leaving, she turned at the door and said, "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be."
As if I was the problem for not quietly absorbing the betrayal.
When the door closed, the house felt hollow.
Too quiet.
I slid down against the wall and finally cried hard, ugly sobs I couldn't control. Not just for what she'd done, but for how quickly she'd walked away from the wreck she caused.
That was when the anger started to settle into something heavier, realization.
The house stayed empty for 2 days.
No calls. Barely any texts.
Just short, clipped messages about logistics, where the spare charger was, if I'd fed the cat.
Nothing about us. Nothing about what she'd done. That silence did something to me.
The fog started lifting. I replayed the last year in my head with new eyes.
Every insult disguised as a joke. Every time she dismissed my feelings as insecurity.
Every argument where I walked away confused, apologizing for things I didn't fully understand. It clicked, this hadn't started with the affair. The affair was just the visible part.
She finally came back on the third night, unannounced.
Walked in like she owned the place, which, technically, she did, but now it felt invasive. She said she'd been thinking.
I asked if she'd been with him. She said that wasn't fair to ask. That answer was an answer. She told me she didn't know what she wanted. Said maybe we should try counseling. Said maybe we were just going through a phase.
10 minutes later, she said she felt more herself when she wasn't around me. Watching her contradict herself in real time was exhausting.
For the first time, I didn't argue. I just listened. And in that quiet, something shifted. I realized I wasn't trying to save the marriage anymore. I was trying to save my dignity.
When she noticed I wasn't fighting back, she got irritated.
Asked why I was being so calm.
Accused me of shutting down.
I almost laughed.
After weeks of chaos, calm felt like oxygen.
That night, I slept in the bed.
She took the couch.
Not out of kindness, out of tension.
And lying there in the dark, I understood something painful but freeing. The worst had already happened.
Everything after this was just a decision.
The next morning, I told her we needed to really talk.
No circling, no blaming, no half-truths. Just facts. I asked her one direct question: Was she still in contact with him? She hesitated just long enough to be honest without meaning to. Then she said yes. Claimed it was complicated. Claimed she couldn't just cut someone off who meant something to her. That was the moment I felt something inside me harden. I told her I wouldn't compete for my own wife. She laughed, sharp and dismissive, and said I was being dramatic again. Said real life wasn't black and white. Said I was forcing her into an ultimatum. Funny how betrayal becomes nuance when the betrayer is uncomfortable. I told her my boundary: if she wanted any chance of staying married, the affair ended immediately and completely. No contact. No excuses. She crossed her arms and said she needed to think about whether she could do that. Think about choosing her husband over the man she'd been sleeping with behind my back. That was my answer. I told her I was done living in uncertainty. That I wasn't going to wait around while she weighed her options like I was a job offer. For the first time since this started, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. She accused me of giving up too easily. Said marriages take work. Said I was throwing away years over one mistake. I reminded her it wasn't one mistake, it was hundreds of choices, lies stacked on top of each other. She stormed out again, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. I stood there in the silence afterward, hands shaking, heart racing, and realized I'd just drawn a line I couldn't erase. And for the first time, I didn't regret it. Once the line was drawn, things unraveled fast. She didn't come home that night. Instead, my phone blew up, her friends, her sister, even one of her co-workers. Different voices, same script. I was being unreasonable. I was pressuring her. I was abandoning her when she was confused. Somehow the affair itself barely made it into the story. It was surreal watching people judge a situation they'd only heard through her carefully edited version. In her telling, she'd made a mistake, felt guilty, and I'd immediately gone nuclear. No mention of months of lying. No mention of hotels and secret messages. Then she texted me, long paragraphs this time. Said she loved me but wasn't in love with me. Said she needed space to find herself. Said I'd always be important to her. Reading it felt like being slowly smothered with a pillow made of clichés. I didn't respond. That silence set her off. The messages turned angry. She accused me of punishing her. Said my refusal to engage was emotional abuse. Said I was being cold on purpose to hurt her. The irony was almost funny, almost. Later that night, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was him. Just one sentence: I didn't mean for this to get so messy. That was it. No apology. No respect. Just inconvenience. Something snapped then, not violently, but cleanly. I blocked the number, muted her messages, and turned off my phone. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. In the morning, I woke up with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Relief. Relief didn't last. It never does. It hit me in the quiet moments, brushing my teeth, making coffee for one out of habit, reaching for my phone to tell her something stupid and insignificant. That's when the grief crept in, heavy and suffocating. I wasn't just mourning the marriage. I was mourning the version of her I thought existed. The woman I defended, trusted, planned a future with. That person felt real to me, even if she never actually was. She came back a few days later to grab more clothes. No warning. No conversation. Just walked in, avoided my eyes, and started filling a suitcase. I asked if she was staying with him. She snapped that it was none of my business anymore. Then, almost as an afterthought, she said she never meant to hurt me. That sentence nearly broke me. I wanted to scream that intent doesn't erase damage. That love doesn't look like deception. Instead, I just nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak without falling apart. After she left, I sat on the floor of the bedroom and cried harder than I had at any point before. Not out of shock or rage, this was different. This was acceptance trying to claw its way in. I started replaying memories, searching for what was real and what was revisionist history. Were the laughs genuine? The trips? The promises? Or were they placeholders until something better came along? The hardest realization was this: even if she came back, even if she begged, the marriage I missed was already dead. Trust doesn't fracture, it shatters. That night, I packed away our wedding photos. Not because I hated her, but because I needed to stop bleeding every time I saw them. Grief isn't loud like anger. It's quiet. And it lingers. A strange thing happened once the grief settled in. My body stopped fighting reality. I started sleeping better. Not great, but better. Eating actual meals instead of forcing down whatever was easiest. The constant knot in my chest loosened just enough for me to breathe without feeling like something was about to collapse. She reached out again, more cautiously this time. Asked how I was doing. Said she missed talking like we used to. I read the messages without reacting, noticing how carefully neutral they were. No accountability, no apology, just a soft probe to see if the door was still unlocked. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I started writing things down. Not to send to her, just for me. Every lie I remembered. Every moment I'd felt small or dismissed. It wasn't about building a case. It was about grounding myself, making sure I didn't rewrite history out of loneliness. When I ran into a mutual friend, they hesitated before speaking, clearly unsure whose side they were allowed to be on. That used to bother me. Now it just felt like confirmation. This wasn't something I needed to explain or justify. One night, she called unexpectedly. Said she was confused, that everything felt wrong, that she didn't know who she was anymore. I listened quietly, then told her I couldn't be her emotional anchor while she figured herself out at my expense. She went silent. Then accused me of being cruel. I hung up. That was the moment I understood something important. Moving on isn't about hate or forgiveness. It's about choosing not to stay stuck in someone else's chaos. And for the first time, the future didn't feel terrifying. It felt open. After weeks of this emotional ping-pong, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay married to someone who had systematically dismantled our trust and treated me like a placeholder. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because I had to protect myself. I told her, calmly, that our marriage was over. Not in a fit of rage, not in a dramatic confrontation, but like stating a fact: this is done. She rolled her eyes, accused me of being cold and vindictive, and claimed she could still make things work if I just tried harder. I reminded her that marriage isn't just about trying harder, it's about honesty, commitment, and respect. She had forfeited all three. Then I did something I didn't expect. I felt a weight lift. Not happiness. Not joy. Just clarity. I wasn't in a storm anymore. I wasn't trapped in the fog of her lies. I was choosing my own path. I filed the papers quietly, without spectacle. I didn't care about public judgment, mutual friends, or family opinions. For the first time in months, I acted solely in my own interest. It was brutal. It hurt. But it was the first real action that felt right since discovering the affair. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had agency again. After the final papers were filed, the silence was deafening. No arguments. No messages. Just empty rooms and the sound of my own thoughts echoing off the walls. At first, it felt hollow, like I was missing something essential. But slowly, I started noticing things I hadn't in years: the way sunlight hit the kitchen counter in the morning, the quiet hum of the city outside, the relief of making decisions for myself without consulting anyone. I started reconnecting with old friends I'd drifted from. Went back to hobbies I'd neglected. Even small things, cooking, running, reading, felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. Each step was tiny, but each one mattered. The hardest part wasn't her absence. It was learning to trust again. Not just other people, but myself. Recognizing my instincts, my judgment, my right to set boundaries. I realized the betrayal had taken something from me, but I could build it back,
stronger than before.
I didn't hate her.
I didn't wish her ill. I just stopped holding space for her in my life.
That in itself was liberating. Rebuilding isn't instant. It's messy. Some days I'd feel grief sneak in. Some days, anger would flare.
But now, each day felt mine to shape, not dictated by someone else's lies.
It wasn't just surviving the end of a marriage, it was learning to live again.
Looking back, I see now that the affair wasn't just about her choices, it was a mirror. It reflected patterns I'd ignored, blind spots I'd justified, and boundaries I hadn't enforced. It showed me what I tolerated, how I coped with discomfort, and how much I underestimated my own resilience. I learned that love isn't enough if respect and honesty aren't there.
That comfort and routine can feel like stability until someone decides otherwise.
That people you trust can hurt you, but that doesn't have to define the rest of your life. I also learned to identify red flags early, to honor my instincts, and to separate fear from intuition. The lies, the gaslighting, the manipulation, they weren't my fault. Accepting that truth didn't erase the pain, but it stopped the self-blame. Most importantly, I learned that moving on doesn't mean erasing the past, it means learning from it, letting it shape you into someone stronger, wiser, and more careful about who you allow into your life. I realized that I had choices: to dwell in anger, to beg, to sink in regret, or to reclaim myself.
Choosing the last one changed everything. The betrayal hurt me deeply.
But surviving it taught me something no marriage, no comfort, no routine ever could.
I am still me.
And that matters more than anyone else's mistakes.
Months have passed since it all ended.
The house feels empty, but not broken, just quiet, like a space finally cleared for something new.
I don't think about her every day anymore.
When I do, it's no longer sharp, just a dull acknowledgement that this chapter is over. I've started imagining a future again, one that isn't dictated by fear, lies, or betrayal. I've realized that happiness isn't about finding the perfect partner, it's about building a life that feels whole, even when others fail you.
Sometimes I catch myself smiling at small things: sunsets, a good cup of coffee, a text from a friend that makes me laugh. Those little moments remind me I survived.
That I can trust myself to choose what's good for me. I've forgiven, in my own way, not her, not the affair, not the lies, but myself for staying as long as I did. For hoping, for trusting, for loving despite the warning signs. If I could give advice to anyone in a similar situation, it would be this: your self-worth isn't determined by someone else's decisions.
Protect it, honor it, and don't let betrayal define you.
You'll be shocked at how strong you really are once you stop trying to fix what someone else broke.
Closure isn't a moment, it's a process. And I've finally reached mine. I'm free.
And for the first time in years, I feel like I really am.